we close out tonight with an interview with Barbara Freedman Doyle. She has a new book out called Make Your Movie, What You Need to Know About the Business and Politics of Filmmaking, and she comes at it from the inside. She was a freelance production coordinator and production supervisor for all the major studios and cable networks. So she knows what it takes to get your foot in the door and keep it there. I'd like to give our listeners a sense of where your passion for film began and how you chose to pursue that passion.
I was always a huge film buff. I am also an extremely compulsive reader. And I just love storytelling in any form. And so whether it's books or film or television, a good story, well told, completely hooks me. And I started off there. I started off thinking I want to be part of the storytelling. And movies was, to me, a combination of, writing a book is a very solitary activity. When you make a movie, you're part of a huge team. And when you make decisions about the movie before it's even made, you get a lot of creative input and you get to shape that story.
And that's the path that you wanted to be a part of, that creative process that led to. But how did you have any idea how to go about accomplishing that?
No, I had no idea whatsoever, actually. I was all trial and error. That's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, was so people didn't have to do what I did, which was kind of spend several years trying to figure it all out. I moved out to L.A. I worked in the rock and roll business a little bit. And then I definitely, used that as sort of a way to get into the movie business, because production is production in some ways. And my background was in PR. And I thought, well, I can write, I can organize events, I can do certain things. How can I take that skill and use it to get a job in the film business? And so it was definitely something where I was going to work in production, because those all are part of production. And I came out to L.A. I knew nobody whatsoever in the film business. And I thought, well, I have college and I can type. So I went to a temp agency that specialized in sending people to work at the studios. And I said, I will take anything as long as it's in production. And they sent me out on a couple of things that were pretty dreadful. And then they sent me out as on a job interview to be the assistant of the head of production at the studio. And the reason they sent me, even though I didn't have any experience really, I had, a little experience working on commercials in New York City, they sent me because of my education, strangely enough. They said, this guy, wants someone smart. And they sent me, and it was just this huge opportunity, somebody who's just has not very much experience except being a PA and, on the streets of New York, getting to work for the head of physical production at a major studio. And I was there for 5 years.
Wow. And it's a big part of your book. You talk about the kind of the stepping stones, like you've just described, but an essential part of that is the cultivation of relationships. Would you say that that's one of the major points to success in the industry, is to cultivate those relationships?
Absolutely. And I will tell you that in one way or another, the relationships, the people I met and the relationships I made during those 5 years at the studio were responsible for the next 20 years of freelance work I did. I think, of the next 20 years, only one job on a film, and I did a lot of films and a lot of television movies, only one came sort of out of, almost like randomly. The rest were completely because I had met someone in that first job who recommended me to someone or who was making a film or who knew me somehow towards that, and I was that totally reliable obsessively perfectionist person in the office that they remembered, and when they needed someone to sort of take care of their production, they thought, we'll ask her, we'll hire her.
Yeah, and I guess that's where it comes in, because they always say it's who you know, but obviously talent and hard work, you have to have those. But then it is who you know, and it's about making an impression, not only with your talent and hard work, but with your demeanor, a demeanor of professionalism and loyalty, and that's important. Yeah,
it's very important. I mean, there are two things. People do not want to be embarrassed by people they work with. Number one, because the industry is an industry of appearances, and how people act is very important. They want to know that when you are in the film business, you are always so busy. And it's because of the way the business is structured, where until something gets going, there are often only 2 or 3 people working on it. And then all of a sudden, when you make the movie, yes, you hire the 55 people. And then when you finish making the movie, it's down to those 2 or 3 people again. So it's a very busy business, and they want someone they can rely on. They want someone who sort of sees what needs to be done and does it quietly and without drama, and they just don't have to think about it anymore, because that's sort of one thing they can cross off on their list of worries. They don't want to have to worry about you. If you, if you get hired in a job, whether it's an entry-level job, a mid-level job, even a very high-level job, the one thing people want to know is that you are going to be completely responsible for doing that job in the best, most careful, most thorough way possible, and that they don't have to think about it anymore.
Right. So when you see people on this path that you took initially, where do you see them fail most often?
I see this sounds very stuffy, and believe me, I'm not a stuffy person, but I see people not looking at it as a profession and looking at it as sort of just a fun thing. And it is a lot of fun, but everybody has to realize that this is a big business. This is, you work on a film, that's a multi-million-dollar business. And so, yes, it's fun, but if you treat it like a game, if you treat it like it's, not seriously enough, even as if you are casual, even in the way you answer the phone, if you're in that level of position, people don't like it. They want you to always be sort of up and smiling, and it's almost like the appearance of being casual, but treating it extremely formally and as if it is the business that it is. And I see that as kind of a big mistake, is people being a little too loose. And even in a production office, people kind of, where the dress is informal and a lot of the discussion is informal, and yet you still have to know there's a pecking order, there's a hierarchy. There are times when someone asks you what you think, that you don't just blurt out whatever you think. You always have to be mindful that you're in a business situation.
I think that's great advice. And also, I mean, in terms of the casual manner that you just brought up, I think a lot of people that succeed, especially in the entertainment industry, they succeed because they have to do this. I mean, it's in their
driven.
DNA.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're very driven, and you have to be driven to want to deal with the stuff you have to deal with. I mean, on the one hand, you're working when you start out, working very, very long hours. You are not getting paid a lot of money, and something has to keep you on track, and it has to come from you, and it's also a freelance business. So unlike in a lot of businesses where you work for the same person years and years, and there's sort of a guarantee of advancement, in the film business, not only is there no guarantee that you'll ever advance, but you may be doing just great, and then somebody's nephew may need a job over the summer, and they may get the thing that you thought you were training for. Because it's very much about people and relationships, and you're kind of expected to deal with that. And it can be very tough, and I see people who get very disappointed, and a lot of times when they get, especially, people who are just starting out, they get very disappointed because they mistake the fact that it's a casual atmosphere for the fact that it's sort of one big family. And they kind of have to keep reminding themselves, this is work. This is work. It's a business. It's not a big family. Your family is your family. Your friends are your friends, and your work is your work. And although you can make friends at work and maybe even meet someone and have a family at work, primarily you have to kind of always look at it as this is work, and the driving energy of the work is not you. It's not even the person you're working for. It's the end game of getting the project made.
Well, and you write the book for beginning filmmakers, and you try to guide them to navigate the pitfalls that they might bump into along the way. And I want to talk to you a little bit about those different stages of production that you discuss in the book, starting with the story phase, the scripting phase. Now, there's a lot of books out there about the actual art and how-tos of screenwriting, but when you tackled that phase, what did you specifically want to discuss?
Well, I think that, there are a lot of very good books about screenwriting out there, and I'm not a screenwriter, but I've worked with a lot of screenwriters, and really my book is about how to work with everybody. And, there is a sort of a misconception that, if you can think of a story, you can write it. And so people tend to discount the feelings of screenwriters a lot. And they kind of tell them, well, okay, now write this, now write this. And that's not the way to work with a screenwriter, just the same way you wouldn't do it with someone who's writing a novel or even a newspaper article. And so there are sort of ways to get your ideas across if you're working in partnership with a screenwriter without telling them how to write. The key to doing well in the film business a lot of times is recognizing that everyone has their part and valuing everyone's part and making them know that you value their part. And, when you do that, the results, first of all, the screenwriter wants to do the extra rewrite. They want to work with you. They want to hear what you have to say. When you don't do that, it's kind of like, what do they know?
Right. Well, there's also the turmoil of a writer so passionate about his idea, and you hear this every now and then that they sell their script or they make a deal for development of their script. And there are a million little compromises along the way until finally the finished script might not even resemble what they started with.
Sure. The writing is one phase of production, and things change, and they change depending upon the cast. They change depending upon the marketplace, and the writer's job is to understand that. They're not going to ever like it, but they have to understand it. And then the producer and director's job is to make the writer feel good about the part they had in it and try and always look to the story. Always sort of all those compromises that are made, and they're made constantly. Does this make it a better story, or does it move it forward to production? Maybe, if you change this, you'll get funding. If you don't change it, you won't. Is it better to not change it and not be able to make the movie? Is it better to change it? How can you change it so that you're true to the story or to the intention of the story? And how can you make everybody feel good about it so that you've got the best possible version of that story, and yet it's ready for the marketplace? It can be hard, right? Writers, it's their baby. and they slave over a script, and they want it to be as it is, but they also have to realize that in the end, it's sort of, there's a point where they have to be ready to give it away, and then it becomes the director's baby, and then the director has to get it to a certain stage, and then it becomes the director and editor's baby, and then ultimately in the marketplace, it becomes the audience's.
Yeah, and another aspect of this that fascinates me, creative people tend to be not necessarily the most social animals sometimes, and I think of those kind of competing sides of your brain between the creative side and the very aggressive salesman side. I mean, do you find that those are kind of two different personalities that a lot of creative people have to juggle?
I find that most creative people, if they're lucky, find someone else to take on the aggressive sales aspect of it. A writer has to be able to pitch their story, and that and they have to be able to deal with producers and agents and everyone. But at a certain point, they are first and foremost a writer. A producer is first and foremost someone who gathers sort of disparate elements, puts them together, and it's almost like baking a cake. In the end, they're a baker. They come up with the cake. And there are people on the business side of the industry who are purely sort of that sales and marketing and agent and negotiation skills. And everyone else just has to be understanding of how the business works and their part in it and how all those things work. Most of the time, they can avoid actually having to do them, or having it detract from their main talent, which might be, directing or writing or producing or as a cinematographer or something like that. But the idea is you have to understand it. Otherwise, you will become sort of a victim of the business where you don't understand what's happening to your movie, what's happening to your art, why are you getting phone calls to work, or why aren't you, why did this thing that everybody loved 6 months ago become something that nobody wants to return your calls about?
I wanted to jump to something involving post-production and the marketing of your film. That's something that you need to be mindful of from the beginning of the process, isn't it?
Yes, because, and especially these days, unless there is a way to market your film and get an audience for your film, no one is going to give you money to make your film. It's not, as recently as 10 years ago, that was part of it, but you could make a film, get it into festivals, people could look at it, it was kind of the dream of the independent filmmaker. Now, even independent filmmakers have to be very cognizant of the fact that someone is going to be looking at it saying, is there an audience for this? And how big an audience? And that often is going to determine the budget of the film. If there's a small niche kind of audience, that's going to determine how much money they can raise. And people are getting very wise to this, so it's not like you can just sort of, not that you would want to, but it's not that you can just sort of pull the wool on, and say, yes, there's a big demand for this tiny niche subject. You kind of have to go and find the money, in that niche. And if something transcends that, then it's great. But in general, people are getting pretty wise to whether there is an audience for a film. And you may love a project, just love it, think it's the greatest thing. If you are an executive or a financier and you don't see that you're going to make the money back on that movie, you're not going to green light it. You're not going to say it's okay to move forward.
So you have to be mindful of those aspects of it when you approach potential investors.
Oh, yeah.
What else should you keep in mind when you, as you outline in your book, what else should you keep in mind when you approach people to ask for money, essentially for your project?
Yeah, really, that's what it is. Cast. It's great to have an unknown cast if you're trying to make a little tiny film, but if you're trying to get distributed, nationally and internationally, you need cast who is recognizable. It's also very important to know what that means. I mean, someone may be a big television star here in the U.S., and outside the U.S., their name may mean nothing. And so that would impact negatively your international distribution. Mm-hmm. Someone who you would least expect might have an international following, and you're kind of like, no, really? They're not a big deal here. But there are actors who have big international followings. So I would say marketability is one, and along with that, part and parcel of that is your cast. Another thing, and this is a strange thing, but you need to be able to tell the story of your movie in shorthand. You need to be able to have a pitch where people immediately understand what the movie is about, because a lot of times the way a film is sold and raise money is through the poster. A poster and a log line can raise financing. And marketers will tell you that the minute they read a script, one of the first things that kind of pushes them towards saying to the studio or saying to their, whoever, the production company, yes, you should go ahead with this, is can they see a poster in their mind?
That makes a lot of sense, though, because especially for a first-timer or someone in the independent realm that's trying to drum up some cash, probably from some avenues that have nothing to do with entertainment necessarily, the investor has to be able to visualize the movie, and they don't necessarily come from the same mindset as a creative person necessarily.
A poster, and I mean, if you give someone who's not used to reading scripts a script, it's very flat. It's very hard for people to look at a script and say, okay, that's going to make a great film if they're not used to sort of doing that leap in their mind. So you have to help them. You have to be able to tell them the story in a way that they can relate to. You have to have a compelling character who they are interested in hearing, okay, what's going to happen to this guy? Anything where you can hook somebody on and sort of bring them on to the trip of the movie. So whether it's a poster, whether it's a great pitch, it really should be all of these things. Whether it's a cast member where you're saying visualize so-and-so in this role. And it should be a gettable person, not like, visualize Brad Pitt or somebody like, where, visualize the biggest movie star in the world. I mean, that's hard because invariably your investors will be disappointed. But some way to draw them in, because if you can get someone to see your movie in their mind, you can get them to give you money to make the movie.
Yeah. Well, and I guess what you're expressing is you need to express to them the dream of your movie that you have in your mind, but remain realistic. And I guess it's just try to spark in them the passion for some percentage of the passion for the project that you yourself have.
Absolutely. And while you're doing this, you have to be passionate, because remember, you're saying to someone, not just invest in this story, but invest in my ability to tell this story. So it's almost like invest in me, invest in the story, invest in my ability to get this all done. And that's a big leap for people, because generally you're not going to someone to ask them to give you money. You're going to strangers, and maybe you've got sort of some kind of a finder, someone who's found a bunch of people who might be interested. But then you have to, bridge that gap between, they can come to the table. You have to get them to want to sort of jump across the table and give you money.
Yeah. There are so many film festivals out there, and you cover this in your book, and there's obviously the few that we all know are the tops. I mean, and they tend to be to inspire kind of buyer frenzy. How if a filmmaker is fortunate enough to be accepted into one of these festivals, how do you navigate that and make the most of that opportunity?
Well, if it's an industry festival, if it's a Sundance, if it's a Toronto, if it's South by Southwest, where people from the industry go, then you're going to do different things than if it's just a nice local film festival. If it's an industry festival, you have to get, the minute you hear your film has been accepted, you have to get to work on getting people from the industry to see that film. Because you go to a festival, there's hundreds of films and lots of choices. Why is someone going to see your film? You have to find a way to get them there. And that may be through some kind of, that may be the point where you might want to have a publicist on, someone who knows these people who can make the calls, because again, it's all relationships. Someone saying, I'm representing so-and-so who has a great movie, the buzz on the movie is great, please come see it, it's going to be showing at this time, and then afterwards come talk to the filmmakers. That kind, you need someone to do that, and so that may be the time where you possibly hire or find some kind of a publicist, some kind of a marketing person or a sales agent. You need to know who are potential buyers for your film, because one of the reasons, a lot of people don't realize you put a film in a film festival almost always in order to get distribution. So who are the people who go to festivals who just go for fun? Who are the people who go to actually buy? And you need to sort of have a strategy. Maybe you want to sell off foreign distribution for very little, so you can say, okay, I have at least some distribution. So that's almost like the thing of somebody wants this film, so maybe you'll want it domestically. You have to have an online or a digital press packet that has all the information about your film, and you have to present that information in the most high-end, professional way possible. Who is involved in your movie? Is there anything unique about your film other than the story? What in the log line and in the photographs that are available digitally will make someone want to come and actually choose your film to come see at the festival? Have you gotten any good reviews? Those should be in that digital press packet. You should make it, don't look at a film festival as an opportunity to see films or to socialize. Look at it as a business opportunity. You are there. You almost have a captive audience. You have people who normally you might not have access to. So look at it, this is not the time to have, kind of have the party. This is the time to actually work, and you can have the party when you go home.
And publicists can be incredibly essential in that process, and I just find it from my end when a festival like a Sundance comes up, and I work closely with publicists to get the word out about various movies at these festivals. But where, if at all, should an agent or an attorney come into play?
Well, it depends what you're trying to do. I mean, of course, you need an attorney when you make the movie. You may need an attorney just for the legal issues of making a movie. You may need an attorney to help you raise money for the film if this is an independent film. But once you're in a festival, you should not be if someone is interested, you should never be negotiating your own deal. You are a filmmaker. They are an attorney. It's worth the money. I can't stress it enough. I've seen more people get sort of a little carried away by someone really wanting their film and signing things and regretting it hugely afterwards, because you need to think about, if you get this much upfront money but no P&A, no prints and advertising money, is your movie just going to disappear? Things like that. You need someone, and it could be an experienced attorney in this area, it could be an agent. You need someone to be able to say, well, this is how this company handles your kind of film. This is how they've done it in the past, and give you an idea of, do you want to go with that company? Do you want to jump at the first offer? Do you want to wait? What is the potential? You need people to tell you this. One of the things independent filmmakers kind of do, they're so used to raising money on their own. They're so used to getting things done on their own that when it comes to the distribution and marketing side, they decide they can do it on their own, and that's a big mistake. At a certain point, you have to step back and say, okay, I'm the filmmaker. Here are the people who really know how to do this. I'm going to trust them to take care of me.